trouble installing, they would consider doing it for no charge. So I do think they address that. As far as complaints go, and whether it's the elderly, the fee for the elderly, or anyone else who had trouble paying it, or the complaints log, in all of those cases, we found that they were doing everything required of them, whether it be of the franchise agreement or the federal law. And as far as negotiate and execute, we did, you know, if that's the wish of the committee, then we'll go back. But we would need specific points as to what you would like us to talk to Time Warner about that hasn't already been worked through in the process after we went to PLD back in August.
Okay, so again, I would suggest that Councilor Clark or anyone has any specific suggestions for the manager and the director to negotiate, that would be good. Regarding the waiving the charge for the elderly, I can tell you for a fact it didn't happen. But beyond that, question for you. Should Time Warner be purchased by Comcast or some other, what are the implications?
We had that conversation with Cheshire TV, and I know that there are representatives from Cheshire TV here tonight because we wanted to, you know, they expressed originally some interest in talking about it. What if Comcast does take place of Time Warner? What could they potentially bring to the table that Time Warner isn't bringing to the table already?
Or the opposite.
Correct, right. And so it was my understanding that there wasn't really anything significant that they could potentially bring to the table. There was some discussion about whether or not they might be a little bit nicer about providing some free capital equipment or an opportunity to fund some capital equipment for Cheshire TV's operations. But there's no guarantee. And of course, if they do take over Time Warner, then we still have the opportunity to negotiate with that organization.
Or do we?
Well,
no, that's,
just like we are now, right?
Maybe that's a city attorney question, because if we sign this agreement likely carries forward for the next, I don't know how many years. City attorney, any thoughts?
Well, it's certainly not privy to the negotiations that are going on between Comcast and Time Warner, but as a general understanding with respect to these kinds of transactions, it would certainly be in Comcast's interest to pick up all of the franchise agreements that exist that Time Warner has. Those are the assets that Comcast would be wanting to purchase. So absent anything else, I would assume that the franchise agreement that we negotiate and enter into and the extension would be assigned to Comcast as a result of the purchase. And they would follow the same terms and conditions at that point.
It would not open the door to further negotiations.
There's nothing in the agreement that allows them or us, frankly, that's correct, to reopen the agreement at that point. That certainly doesn't mean that either party can't approach the other party at any time during the process before the agreement expires and request a reopening and a reconsideration.
Any committee questions for the director?
Yes, if I may, you mentioned some of the other things that might have been asked of them, and over the last 10 years, the number of minutes per hour of non-commercial programming has decreased. Now, but they keep charging us extra every year. Now, might not we negotiate with them, if they're going to every hour instead of giving us 28 minutes, now they're giving us 24 minutes every hour. That kind of thing. There are a lot of things that can be negotiated. The things that they have changed. Not that they have changed, but have changed because of the Federal Communications Act. Those things in the federal things that they sort of use to say, well, we have no control over.
Yes.
Although I understand the concerns, I cannot say whether or not any other provider would do any better or worse in the same category, whether it's Comcast or whoever the other cable TV providers are out there in other parts of the country. I know that it is in Time Warner's best interest to be as competitive as possible, whether they are competing with other land-based services or satellite-based services, or now the broadband internet-based services. So I can't say what we might negotiate with them if we were opening up the franchise in 2018 versus 2023, whether or not they'd be willing to change those kind of numbers, but I'm confident that they will, whether or not we open up the negotiations, do whatever it takes to be competitive.
I guess my question was, has any of those been broached with them?
No, that has not been a part of this negotiation process. The complaints or the programming. It was just not part of getting the second channel for Cheshire TV. It did not come up in any of the discussions.
I don't see how network programming has anything to do with the cable station.
Well,
What they do for their commercial services.
well, when we're negotiating, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, but if we're renegotiating, and it says to negotiate and execute a new contract, wouldn't that open up all of the things that are a benefit to we're advocates of our ratepayer. Wouldn't that open up all of the things that our ratepayer would want to have whenever we open up negotiations, in business? If we're gonna renegotiate a business contract, you're gonna bring up all of the things that you think that are gonna benefit you or your people or whatever. And if we haven't brought up those things in the negotiations, then it really isn't a negotiation. What we're doing is just giving them everything they want to have and nothing that we want to have. And I just don't think that that's the way to go about this, and I'm going to oppose giving them a 5-year extension on their contract.
May I respond?
Say again?
May I respond?
Yes.
Just note that, I just want to make it clear that certainly we could address other points. This was not an opening up of the franchise agreement. It was an amendment to address a specific request of Cheshire TV. So Time Warner stands in the position of being able to say, I guess we don't want to do this, and we'll wait until 2018 when Cheshire TV doesn't get the second channel. So that's the risk we take in opening it up to that extent.
Anything further for the director? Mr. Perkins, did you want to add anything, or?
I'm happy to answer questions, but I don't have anything to add.
I have a question of Mr. Perkins.
Come on. Name and address, please.
Lee Perkins, 62 Colonial Drive.
We're talking about the second channel basically being a government and educational channel. Right now, between, for example, the school board and the city council, about how many hours per month is that?
Per month?
Per month.
Excuse me. Would it be all right if I did it by week and then you can just multiply that by 4? I would say on average there's probably at least 20 hours a week of government and educational programming. It isn't always at the full 20, but because the meetings are on kind of an odd every other week schedule, school board meetings are monthly. In order to maintain some weekly normalcy, we have to leave those times blocked open. So even though the council is only on every other week, every Thursday night is open, and we're full. There's no room left in the schedule, and we get a lot of feedback. Someone asked earlier if we had surveyed people. For years, people have been saying, I wish that believe it or not, they would like to see those replayed more often, and because they can be so long. For anybody that doesn't know, our government programming block is Saturdays from noon to 8, and it's usually a full 8-hour block between all the different meetings. And to squeeze an 8-hour replay in 3 or 4 times a week just wipes out huge chunks of the other programming time. So the second channel would also give us the opportunity to bring back a bulletin board. So while it wouldn't be, all government meetings all the time, it would be replays of those meetings, and then between them would be a scrolling bulletin board like there used to be, which I think that a lot of people would appreciate. And over the year, I just got a phone call yesterday from somebody that wanted to put a notice on our bulletin board, which has been gone for 8 years, so I don't think they're a regular viewer, but the decision to ask for a second channel started almost 3 years ago, and we really wanted to be sure that we did this properly, that we didn't do it in such a way that we would regret it later. And the cost of $6,000 for hardware is really negligible when you spread that out over all the years, and it'll be 1 or 2 pennies per person. So we think it's the best possible arrangement given the circumstances. And for what it's worth, even though it's not really part of the question, you're talking about Time Warner Cable, one of the largest corporations in the world, and as much as I would like them to do what I want them to do, they're going to do what they're going to do. So I would love to have a renegotiation in 2018 and get $100,000 a year for equipment and 2 HD channels and a production van, and but it's not going to happen. So we will just chip away a little bit at a time over 10 years until we get everything we want.
A follow-up question. This is probably going to be rhetorical. So if my math is correct, 20 times 4 is 80, and if you show each show twice, that's 160, and there's only 168 hours in a week. You don't have much time for your bulletin board, so.
Right, well, again, I have to leave blocks open, even though, sometimes you guys have meetings that last 30 minutes, but I have to block them at 2 hours. And when they go over 2 hours, we have to figure out how to shuffle everything to make everything fit. And it's not pleasant when someone comes into the studio every week and makes an hour-long show, and then gets preempted by the last 30 minutes of a meeting, and those regular viewers don't get to see it. They feel like they've wasted their time coming in to produce it. And so we think that this meets everyone's needs as closely as possible and costs the least amount of money.
Real quick, Charlie. So basically, once you get the second channel is basically going to be quite full. Standalone by a full.
It'll be full of lots and lots of replays of meetings and bulletin boards.
Thank you.
Any further questions for Mr. Perkins? Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Okay, so now it's committee time for a motion and some action on such.
The public speak?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, please. From the public.
Right here?
Yep, please have a seat.
Joe Mirzoff, Summit Road.
Don't pick it up.
What?
The volume picks up when you start talking.
I like your drift. I've only been here since April, and when I signed up for Time Warner, I thought I was going to be paying like $90 for everything, phone, and now I'm paying twice as much, and I have complained, so if you haven't gotten